Thank you for joining us in person and online. My name is Lisa Rosser.
And I'm Julian Rosser.
And we are really excited about talking about UFOs and unveiling all the mystery and the conspiracy around them. So thank you for joining us today. Today is actually a really good time to talk about this.
Absolutely.
Because the UFO movement the last few years has been building a lot of momentum, and it's been in the news more, and it's been kind of in the place where we're forcing reactions to happen at higher levels. And this really culminated recently. In July of this year, there was a congressional hearing where Congress members heard testimony from well-respected people who had UFO sightings and their experiences with the sightings and with the investigation or lack thereof afterwards. So we can't go through all the testimony. It's really fascinating, but we'll give you a couple highlights. So one of the people here, the gentleman on the left, is Ryan Graves, and he's a former Navy fighter pilot, and he's had several UFO sightings over the years, which is really interesting because he was trained as an expert observer. So his job was to know what aircrafts were in their vicinity and in their operating area. And he mentioned that some of the UFOs that he's seen over the years were tracked on multiple different sensors, that they showed great speeds, they could hold their position against hurricane force winds, and there were no visible means of lift, control surfaces, or propulsion. And that's quite fascinating. And he told a story about a sighting off the coast of Virginia Beach. There were two jets about 100 feet apart, and they came across this gray cube that was in a clear sphere, and it was not moving in the wind. And these jets actually had to go off course to avoid this, and they had to abort their mission because of it. And after this, their squadron put through a safety report, but they mentioned after the safety report that there was no acknowledgement of the report, and they were not given any further mechanism or provided any other steps to take for future sightings.
It's pretty bizarre that they encountered an object stationary in the sky. It's the last thing you expect if you're in a plane, to encounter a stationary object in the sky, and yet they didn't do any further investigation.
Well, that was their concern. It's a safety issue for pilots, and the governments or their higher-ups are doing nothing about it.
It's extraordinary. Another example, the gentleman in the middle there, his name's David Grush. He's a former Air Force major, a U.S. intelligence official, and he didn't see the objects himself, but he's read reports and things. He's really a whistleblower. He's come forth with information talking about recovered spacecraft, reverse engineering, non-human biologics. Just these phrases are like, wow, what on earth is going on here? And he's coming forward because this information is just not out there in the public as it really should be.
Indeed, yeah. And the gentleman on the right there is David Fravor. He's a retired Navy commander and Top Gun Naval Flight School graduate, which, let's just say, if any of us were like that, we would be introducing ourselves constantly as a Top Gun Naval Flight School graduate. But he had a really interesting sighting in November of 2004. And this sighting has gotten a lot of press. The New York Times did a piece about it in 2017, and it's really kind of boosted the movement because he's such a well-respected and trusted person. So he was at the time off the coast of San Diego, about 100 miles off the coast, and they were doing some training there with several different ships and airplanes. And one of the ships that was part of the training group, the USS Princeton, detected what their operators called multiple anomalous aerial vehicles just over the horizon. So Commander Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich were told to go check it out. So they went over there, and what they were also told were that these craft these aerials that they saw were at 20,000 feet, and then within seconds they'd be at 80,000 feet, and then back down to 20. Now these are kind of numbers, they don't mean a lot to us, but if you think you're flying cross country, you fly at 30,000 feet. So these, and 80,000 feet is space. So they were going from 20,000 feet to space in seconds and back down.
It's incredible, absolutely incredible.
So they went to go have a closer look. And it was a beautiful day, clear skies, no white caps in the water. But there was this kind of white water area. And above this white water area, Dr. David Fravor described it as a white tic-tac, kind of floating over that area. And, like the breath mint.
Yeah.
And so he went in. And that's where Tic Tacs have kind of gotten their name.
It's a great marketing strategy.
It's a great marketing strategy. So he went in to have a closer look. And when he went in to have a closer look, he described this Tic Tac as mirroring his movements. So he knew there was some intelligence there. It would do what he did. And he also, when he got a closer look, he said it was about the size of his jet. He said that he noticed no wings, no ways of moving around, no exhaust, no markings on this Tic Tac. And when he came in to actually cut it off, it kind of moved away so quickly it seemed to disappear. And he couldn't kind of figure out where it went. But the radar on the ship picked it up just seconds later, and it had moved 60 miles away. What's really interesting about the 60 miles away is that that was their cap point, which is their secret rendezvous point. So not only was this craft able to move 60 miles in seconds, it also knew their secret rendezvous position.
It's a great demonstration of both technical supremacy in terms of the speed and the lack of wings and exhaust, but also this a supremacy in another way that they had knowledge of this secret rendezvous point that was only known to a handful of people.
Absolutely, and it is really incredible. And because of these stories and so many others that are coming out, it's really an unprecedented time to talk about UFOs. Many high-ranking officials have spoken out about their belief in UFOs and extraterrestrial life. Included are the former director of the CIA, former national intelligence officials, former and current congressional members. The NASA head, Bill Nelson, has said that he has spoken to many people who've had UFO sightings, and he absolutely believes them. And I'll give you a quote. He says that this is the head of NASA. "Who am I to say that planet Earth is the only location of a life form that is civilized and organized like ours?" And I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's awfully small thinking to think that, isn't it? Another famous person who's had a UFO sighting is Jimmy Carter. And I don't know if anybody here remembers this, but he talked about it when he was campaigning in the 70s. But he was with about 10 or 12 other people. He was about to give a talk at a Lions Club. And they saw a white object move towards them from off the horizon. It changed color from white to red to blue, and then it left again. And they all saw this, and it really affected Jimmy Carter on a personal level. It stuck with him. And he even mentioned about it when he was campaigning that one thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified objects in the sky. So there we go. But as we were saying, with this congressional hearing and all of these people coming out, the government is kind of being forced to make some sort of official response. So what they did in July of last year was they created the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Let's all say that 10 times really fast. That's
very user-friendly, helpful name that's easy to remember.
Well, it's not user-friendly, and that's kind of the point, is that they're not real, they're kind of being cooperative in name only. So this office, which is under the Department of Defense, is tasked with creating a space for you to report any UFO sightings, and they will then investigate and kind of feedback results. But interestingly, this was created in July of last year, and as of just a week and a half ago, their website launched. So they're not really moving very quickly. They're not trying that hard. And I checked this morning. Their website still has no way to report, it has no email, and it has no phone number. So there's really no way that they're investigating anything because there's no way to make any reports.
They're pretending to do something about it at the end of the day. So really, what are these craft? Well, in 1947, they asked the question, what are the flying saucers as they were then known? And this was the result of that poll. You've got imagination, optical illusions, and so on, 29%. Don't know, a third. US secret weapon, part of the atomic bomb. This is 47, of course, not long after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's 15%. 10% hoax. 9% other, which is interesting. Weather forecasting devices, aeroplanes, and a Russian secret weapon. What is really, really conspicuously absent from this report is extraterrestrials, aliens. It's not even there. It's not even, unless it's under the other. Perhaps either it's under the other or it was whitewashed out. So this is 1947. So if we come forward 40 odd years, another poll, this time the question is, do you believe that UFOs are probably alien ships or alien life forms, or that they have some natural scientific explanation? First of all, I have a problem with the question, because why can an alien ship not be a natural scientific explanation? But anyway, putting that aside, you've got 20% think that they are extraterrestrial, 50% think they're something else, 29% not too sure. So this is 1998. We come forward to last year. Again, it's changing. So we're going from not even appearing in the poll, 20%, now 34% last year think they're aliens, 32% think they're some other sort of explanation, and there's still a good chunk of people that just don't really know. And I dare say that I would hazard a guess that has even changed this year, especially perhaps even after this US Congressional Hearing, because it got so much publicity in the mainstream. But it's certainly not a recent phenomena. It goes a long, long way back. In the 4th to the 8th century BC, we had mention of the Vimanas. These are the flying celestial vehicles, as they're known. This is the Pushpaka Vimana from the Ramayana, the ancient Hindu text. And the painting is more recent, but they talked about these flying celestial vehicles as they were known then. Another, perhaps the most famous object in the sky, the Star of Bethlehem. But of course, if any of you have ever tried, and I would encourage you to try this, it's a very interesting experiment. It sort of illustrates it to you. Go outside at night and pick a star and try to follow it and see if you think it would be able to lead you to a particular building. It just doesn't work like that. Why could that star not have been a spacecraft? Leading 3 wise men, not 3 foolish men, but 3 very wise men to a particular location where an individual was to be born who would virtually transform life on Earth. So a very key moment in our history. I don't see why it's that hard to think that it could be a spacecraft. Here's a painting from 1710. Looks like a UFO to me.
Well, I think this is interesting because in 1710 we didn't have airplanes. And, same with the Star of Bethlehem and the Vimanas, you call them UFOs, what you're kind of familiar with. I mean, we used to call them flying saucers, So flying celestial vehicle is probably the most accurate
Very nice, yeah.
that we've heard so far. But, this person did not have an airplane, and I wonder if they'd seen a UFO to be able to paint something like that.
Yeah, perhaps they did.
Yeah.
And of course we have the miracle of the sun.
The miracle of the sun is a really interesting one because of the volume of people who witnessed this. So in a small village in Portugal, Fatima, Portugal, in 1917, 3 children were visited by what they believed to be an angel. And this angel spoke to them and told them that she was going to come back at future dates, and she gave them the dates. And because this was a small religious community, when these children said they were visited by angels, word spread like absolute wildfire. So by the 3rd visit, August 17th, 1917, tens of thousands of people showed up, and this is an actual picture of the event. Now these people, some estimates were up to 100,000 people, but definitely tens of thousands of people saw. What they saw was a sun, not the sun, but a sun, zigzag and dance across the sky and change colors. Similar, I suppose, to what Jimmy Carter saw.
And similar to what many, many other people have seen as well.
And this sighting lasted for about 10 minutes. And so I think this is really interesting. There's actually kind of a theme coming through with how many of these are actually tied to religious events, whereas now we kind of tie them more closely to military sightings, but that's because they have the equipment to kind of monitor and film these sorts of things. But a lot of these are tied to religious events over history.
So why are we not hearing more about them? Surely it's front page news, at least, that we're being visited by extraterrestrials. Well, Donald Kehoe wrote a book in 1950 called The Flying Saucers Are Real, and in that book he described what he referred to as the silence group, the dark forces, if you like, for want of a better term, the people behind the scenes, the puppet masters, they've got various different names, the people controlling things who are conspiring to keep this information from the public. Here's an example from 1962. It's all phooey, this newspaper report says. And I'll just read you the opening lines. There's no such thing as a flying saucer. That's official, says the US Air Force. Birds, balloons, lights, hoaxes, the sources may be, but not spaceships from other planets. Not very convincing if you ask me. But what I think is interesting is it goes on in this report to say that none of these objects, of the 7,369 they analysed, none of them had technical qualities beyond the range of present-day US scientific knowledge. However, we've just heard that they do have technical qualities beyond the range of scientific knowledge.
It's all phooey.
It's all phooey. It's just not, it's a different phooey to what they're referring to there. So, but interestingly, because this is from the Air Force, if we go back to 1953, there was a time when the CIA met with the Air Force. It was called the Robertson Panel. And they were discussing UFOs. Now, 20 years later, 1974, through a Freedom of Information Act request, it came out that at that meeting, the CIA recommended the Air Force adopt a policy of debunking UFOs. And this is the result of that. This is the result of that. And so Freedom of Information Act requests can bring forth information, as they did here. And there's certainly the blackvault.com, John Greenwald, he's submitted countless of these. His website has over 3 million pages of data that he's extracted out from the government through this type of approach. Some of them are really revealing, not all of them are really revealing, as this one shows. This one probably was quite an interesting one. I'll just read you the subject line there. Unidentified aerial phenomenon, and it's for the Secretary of the Navy from the Director of Naval Intelligence Activity. This is 2020 as well. So this is, it could have been a real juicy piece of information. Probably it is. That's why they've got rid of all the good bits. But even the to, from, and the subject are quite a tease there. So there's a real stigma around this subject. I'm sure those of you who are interested in this, you're all here and online, you're all interested in this, and you know that there's this stigma around. People ridicule it, they kind of laugh at it when you talk about it seriously. But fortunately not, and that stigma holds things back, but fortunately not everyone is affected by it. There are some people who are really working hard to still study it, even in the face of this ridicule. The Galileo Project is coming out of Harvard University. A lot of very credible people, academics from a wide range of disciplines who are taking this subject seriously, and they're trying to get real data to really understand it in a proper scientific way. They're even looking to put instruments into space. They are really, they're doing a very, very commendable job. And why more people aren't doing this is just, it's beyond me. And the Galileo Project is headed by a man named Avi Loeb, who's a very, he's not afraid of the stigma.
He's very brave.
He's a brave scientist who's just, he doesn't care what people think of him. He's interested in it and he's going after it, and more power to him. This report came out, I saw recently online. The headline really caught my attention. Harvard physicists searching for UFO evidence says humanity will view alien intelligence like God. And he's talking here about the kind of gap between our intelligence and their intelligence. It's so vast, he's postulating here, that they will seem virtually like gods. There's just such a gap between us and them. And he's not saying that, he's not pushing a religious angle, but he's sort of raising a very interesting point there, I think.
Yeah, and it makes sense because throughout history, that's how we explain something that we can't understand, right? If something is outside of our understanding, we attribute it to God.
Yeah, a miracle.
A miracle, that's right, like the miracle of the sun. Yeah. Well, another pioneering campaigner is Dr. George King, who's the founder of the Aetherius Society. Now, the Aetherius Society is the world's oldest international UFO organization. And all the way back in 1958, 65 years ago last month actually, Dr. King was in Trafalgar Square in London campaigning for the government to tell the truth about what they know about UFOs. And we have a short 1-minute clip here of this rally that we'll show you now.
What's the reason for this demonstration?
Well, we believe that the Air Ministry and the government of this country know that flying saucers exist.
Didn't you have a communication with Mars or something like that?
I have had frequent communications with Mars and Venus, yes.
You're convinced that flying saucers do exist?
Absolutely. I've met these people physically, and they were as physical to me as you are.
What language do you speak when you meet them?
In the meetings I've had with these people, we converse in English.
If these people really do exist, why don't they land and make themselves known?
This is very difficult. They have to pick their contactees very, very carefully. It wouldn't be very easily possible for a man from Venus to contact a normal man. There's a matter of magnetic flow between the two individuals.
Quite an interesting sort of thing to be claiming in 1958. You think about the stigma that exists now and the stigma that must have existed 65 years ago. It's really wonderful that he was leading that. Now, Dr. King was a contactee, and he was right that these cosmic masters, as he called them, are very particular about who they can speak to because of magnetic and many other reasons. But Dr. King was prepared for this. So he spent 8 to 10 hours a day for over a decade practicing advanced yoga practices, not hatha yoga like we think of yoga today, but Agni yoga, Bhakti yoga, many different kinds of yoga. And he did this on top of holding down a full-time job. So that gives you the sort of, if you are doing practices for 8 to 10 hours a day and you have a full-time job and you have to do your dishes and it doesn't leave a lot of time for a lot of other things. But what he did was he was able to get himself in a position where he could take transmissions from these great cosmic beings. And he ended up taking transmissions for the rest of his life for the next 43 years. And he was able to go into a positive somatic yogic trance, and that's how he was able to take these transmissions. And he's recorded these transmissions, and I'm going to read one to you now from Mars Sector 6, who's a being from Mars, and he is talking about the conspiracy.
This is a photo of him in the transmission room where he took a lot of these recordings, which was just in the building next door here.
So this is Mars Sector 6. When you talk upon Terra about the Silence Group, it does exist. The Silence Group, what is it? I will tell you beyond doubt. It is run by the great financial organizations that move countries, organizations which cause conflict between one country and another so that war may result, so that their profit may be great indeed. Organizations which have sworn to rule Terra with an iron hand. They cannot do it openly. How can they do it? There is only one way. That is by playing one fraction against the other and causing internal strife between the two. The Silence Group does exist. Well, we can see that divide and conquer everywhere, in politics, in different nationalities, in different countries. It's everywhere.
It's a very sobering message, that one. And the Cosmic Masters who spoke through Dr. King talked on a lot of different themes. Generally, they were sort of messages of encouragement and inspiration and trying to get humanity to get its act together and go out and help one another. But there were some very interesting ones relating to the topic at hand today, UFOs, such as that. But they also gave some more detailed aspects about the craft and some of the technologies and things. So I'll go through a few of those now. Firstly, just if you've got any idea what the largest sort of craft size is, here's an example. They say they could be up to 5,000 miles long, the sort of cigar-shaped mothership, which is, it's the width of Africa. You know, this is like our largest craft, aircraft carrier, whatever our largest vehicle is. It wouldn't even be visible on this map, and that's how big theirs is. There it is on the globe. Just to give you another sort of sense of it, this is big. It can have these can travel intergalactically, and they can carry up to 7,000 or so of the smaller scout patrol vessels. We've got an example of one of those here. This is one that Dr. King actually brought from the UK to Los Angeles here in the 1960s. He was doing that rally for them to reveal the truth in 1958, but he moved here in the 60s. These vehicles, they said, normally might have sort of up to 5 occupants. They are 36.5 feet wide, which for those of you here, it's from that corner of the room to this corner here of the kind of carpeted area is about that width. That's the diameter of one of these craft. So to just give you a sense of them. And he also talked about remote controlled vessels, unmanned drone type of things, which are disc-shaped, silvery, perhaps tic-tac.
Perhaps tic-tac-like.
Obviously different sizes as well that carry instruments to, you know, do different kinds of things. One thing that comes up is their propulsion method. People are often interested in this. We heard earlier that they don't have exhaust. Anytime you have an engine on a jet, for us it would have, the engine itself would be hot, and obviously the exhaust would be hot, but these things don't seem to have that. So how do they propel themselves? Well, apparently the messages that have come through Dr. King talk about a gravitational understanding far beyond ours. So they can see gravity as dual-poled, kind of like magnetism. You have a north and a south pole. They understand gravity in a similar way. So if they're coming into a planet, they can use gravity in one way, but they can reverse the poles of gravity and use it to propel themselves away as well. And obviously sort of back and forth to kind of manipulate their flight, which is just absolutely phenomenal. But obviously, if they're away from a planet, they don't necessarily have the same gravity to work with, so they can use other methods. So we've got now a extract of a lecture that Dr. King gave in 1977 called The Occult Significance of Flying Saucers. And here he's talking about some of their other technologies, including the propulsion systems in a bit more detail.
If they go out into space, away from a gravitational pull, they have a different drive system, as do the big mothercraft that bring them here. These little things don't fly around the galaxy. These are just what we call them scout patrol vessels. That's all they are. Some of them are fairly small. So the mothercraft use a different propulsion system depending on where they come from. In this solar system, a propulsion system has been devised which allows them to exceed the speed of light. Mr. Einstein, with all credit due to you, sir, light is not the ultimate velocity. In fact, thought travels quicker through free space than light. Thought travels 4 million times the speed of light through free space, not through your body, through free space. However, this propulsion system is something different. They know that there are what we call a universal supply of energies, and they can tune into this universal supply of energies and use it as a propulsion system. And you can get, well, almost any velocity you like. There is something else too that's interesting to note, that if you do go in a flying saucer, which you probably will one day, who knows, you will not feel any G-force. In fact, when the thing takes off, you won't feel any more G-force than if you were taking off in, say, a fast sports car. And then after that, the G-force will cease on your body. That is because they have, especially with the gravitational propulsion system, devised a system which makes the same pressure, puts an even pressure on all molecules within the sphere and on the outside of the sphere. In other words, when you're in one of these, you're in a tiny little universe, you know, with its own gravitation, etc., etc. And as the gravitation is controlled, an equal stress is put on all molecules of any inhabitants within the craft and on the craft itself. Therefore, they are not subject to G-forces. If they were, their bodies, some of their bodies are just as frail as yours, and they would be smashed to pieces.
Well, I just think that's very interesting to go back now to that news article that there's nothing to suggest that their technology is anything we're not familiar with, but it certainly sounds like it is.
Absolutely, and of course they have other abilities as well. Whilst they can sort of become invisible in different ways. One way they described, as they said, they can rotate the photons in a 360-degree arc around the vessel. I don't know what that means, to be honest, but that's how they described it. And maybe at some point in the future, our scientists will be able to understand what that means and explain it. They said these craft are sometimes made of organic metal, that's a living metal, that can be self-reproducing and susceptible to the thoughts of the operators of the spacecraft, which is quite incredible. They have force fields around them which are magnetic, and these force fields are protective, protect them from friction of the atmosphere sometimes when they're traveling. They can also affect instruments, and this is sometimes one of the reasons why they have problems with some instruments when they're trying to record them, and one of the reasons why they're generally blurry in photographs is because of this interference from this magnetic field that they have. They also have incredible powers, and I just thought the last example of this that I would discuss was something that happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 1967. And to me, this demonstrates two aspects. Firstly, it demonstrates a kind of technical supremacy, vastly technical supremacy, but it also illustrates a very, very different way of thinking. Now, this Air Force Base is where they had some nuclear missiles. So as you can imagine, there must be extremely high security there to protect these things, which, you can imagine it, high-tech security.
So anyway.
You certainly hope so.
Yeah.
You'd certainly hope so. Now, on this particular day in March 1967, a UFO was hovering over the base, and it was reported, it was seen by various personnel there, and while it was there, 10 nuclear missiles were made inoperable. They were deactivated.
Deactivated, yeah.
And so this shows, firstly, as I said, a technical supremacy, vastly so. They didn't set foot on the base, and yet they were able to get through all of the security measures and deactivate these missiles.
And without harming anybody.
Without harming anyone, that is amazing in itself. But secondly, they demonstrated this technical supremacy in a way that is completely different to the way humans do things. If humans want to show off how tough they are, how great they are, they would have blown them up. You know, we've all seen, this is how do we demonstrate how tough, big and tough we are? Let's
Big
blow
explosion.
something up. Whereas they said they could have presumably blown them up, and that would have been a very big demonstration. But instead they chose to, I think, create even a more powerful demonstration by saying, no, we could blow these things up, but we're not going to. We're going to deactivate them instead. It's really a very alien way of thinking compared to humanity.
Absolutely it is, yeah.
And one other thing, we talked about invisibility, but sometimes they're shown to kind of blink in and out of existence.
Yeah, they are, and the Cosmic Masters have explained to us how that works. So they're not blinking in and out of existence. What they're doing is they're changing their vibration level. So all around Earth we have different levels of vibration. And what these craft and the beings on these craft are able to do is raise and lower this vibration. So we're on this plane of vibration where everything is very physical. On a higher plane, it's the same. It's all very physical for them. And these craft are able to move in between these planes. Now, this is the same with all of the planets in our solar system. They all have these different planes of vibration around them. And you could think about it like the light spectrum. So we know the light spectrum, we are not seeing all of the light. There's infrared, which we can't see. We can detect, but we can't see it. And we know we can't detect everything on the light spectrum either. So it's not really out of the realms of possibility that, given the advanced technology that these beings have, that they're able to do something that we scientifically can't understand yet. And as I say, these are around all of the planets of the Earth. We're told that, like for example, if the Perseverance rover on Mars were able to detect different levels of vibration, they would see a planet teeming with life. We're told that Jupiter is the reception center for Interplanetary Confederation, which has its seat on Saturn. Saturn is the most advanced planet in our solar system. Uranus and Venus are also highly advanced. Mercury is the major communication center, and Mars houses the engineers and the builders of the solar system. So all of these craft actually that we're seeing are built on Mars.
It's absolutely
It's
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
And we have a lecture, another short 3-minute extract from Dr. King talking now about life on other planets.
You know what kind of beings inhabit Saturn, don't you? Everybody should know that. I mean, kids should be taught that at school. Does everybody know what kind of people inhabit Saturn? Who does know? A few do. Kind of people who inhabit Saturn, and there's one way to find out, that's to make yourself so advanced that you're allowed to go there, isn't it? Kind of people who inhabit Saturn are very, very highly evolved people. They do not inhabit a nasty-looking physical structure like we on Earth do. Some of them live in more or less an ovoid shape, which of course is the perfect shape through nature, is an ovoid. They live in this ovoid kind of shape. They have tremendous mental capabilities, way above our conception, and great spiritual capabilities as well. They live for many, many thousands of years in the same physical structure, and they are teachers throughout the galaxy. They're spread right to the far end, even over the rim, as a matter of fact. They're teachers throughout the galaxy. They can live in any environmental conditions which are found in nature. In fact, they could live in the middle of the sun, which may surprise you or not. Truth has always been stranger than fiction, you know. When you're talking about space and what it contains, then you get it, it's really strange. Because their body is completely adaptable. It's more of an energy body in a way than ours is. So, you know, seeing great cultured races like this with millions, hundreds of millions of decades of intelligence and research behind them, who want to come to this place? Except for one reason: to see what not to do. And that's about the only reason they'd want to come here. So some people then are not interested in us, per se. And of course others are. Generally the people from Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn and so on are interested in us and have been for thousands of years. In fact, Sri Krishna, probably the greatest master of all times, whoever inhabited an Earth physical body, came from the planet Saturn. Jesus came from Venus. Buddha came from Venus. The great adept Hercules, who appears in Greek mythology, he came from the planet Mars. Samson, who, by the way, the history of Samson is not very well reported. He too was a great adept who had to bring about a certain condition. He came from the planet Mars, etc., etc., etc. And so it's gone on all through history.
I think there's an awful lot to unpack in that.
Yes.
But something that really stands out again is this incredible technology and abilities that they have, and they just are not able. We're not able to really understand it fully, but that doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't exist.
That's right. So great beings have visited Earth throughout history. Dr. King mentioned a few of them there, Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, but there are others, Hercules, who he said, Sankaracharya, Patanjali, Lao Tzu, and many others. Sometimes they work behind the scenes, completely incognito. Other times they've done so more overtly in the public eye. Are they a threat to national security? In this context, this question is completely absurd, but it is a question that is coming up in the media, it's coming from politicians. It's something that they are discussing, this possibility of UFOs and extraterrestrials being a threat. The human race is operating at a really basic level. We have wars constantly. We've had them throughout our history. We are constantly fighting one another. There's violence everywhere, famine. We've got a lot of problems.
Well, that's actually what we read earlier. That's exactly what the Silence Group is trying to get us to do, is divide and conquer, fight against each other.
And they're doing a good job of it.
They're doing a good job.
They're doing a very good job of it. And this is really what these beings who have spoken through Dr. King are here to help with. They are here to help. They're not here to take over the world. If they wanted to, they clearly could have done. They can turn nuclear missiles off. They can easily detonate them. They could do a lot more if they wanted to. They clearly have a technical supremacy of us. But they're here to try and help us evolve. They're trying to raise the consciousness of our race slowly but collectively. And just as if someone was dying of thirst, you couldn't give them a whole jug of water to knock back. You give them a little bit and let them gradually kind of get used to it. In a way, that's what they're doing with us now. They're helping us to gradually awaken to their knowledge of their existence. And we're seeing that in those polls. Over time, more and more people are kind of awakening to this. So why don't they give us a sign? Dr. King referred to an answer. I've just talked about it a bit there. Mars Sector 6, again, gave a very interesting answer to this question, why don't they give us a sign? This was in 1956. I'll just read a short extract here in a message he gave, which was called A Sign. He says, "Many brothers of terror have requested from us a sign. Many signs have been given by people from other planets, signs which should have proved to thinking terrestrial men beyond any doubt that we do exist, that we are indeed living entities, that we have indeed the interest of terror at heart. As numerous, though, as these signs have been, they still do not satisfy certain terrestrial intelligences. I ask my brothers from Terra, who require as a sign a landing of one of our craft in a prominent position, to give us a sign. Science has requested a sign from flying saucers. I ask science to give us their sign. What sign do we require? Their goodwill, their complete, open-minded honesty, and their proof that if we reveal to them the secrets of the vibration of crystals, these secrets will be used for the benefit of all. We cannot reveal our science to the scientists of terror until they prove to us their godliness. We would only be instrumental in taking terror back another 70 decades if we gave the secrets of our gravitational control to you now.
I think that makes perfect sense, because if any government were given a superior form of technology, they would use it under the ruse of defense. It would not be used for its intended purposes, for good.
Absolutely. And it's been shown so many times. So all life is one. That's a key message from these cosmic masters. We are one, and we are here on Earth to evolve. Now, logically, we can't only evolve ourselves. To evolve, we must help each other. Service to others is virtually the absolute key of the message that they have given in all of its myriad forms. Service to others really is what it comes down to. And it's the only way in the long run that we're going to evolve. So now we're going to play just another short extract, this time from a lecture that Dr. King Dave gave in 1961, and this is talking about the importance of service for humanity going into the future.
We'll see that service is becoming more and more important in these days, because it is the new yoga of the age. It is the new religion. It will bypass all other religions. It will see all other religions out and transmuted into religions of service. And now I'll throw something out on the astral realms and the mental realms of this earth, and hearken to it, because here is a prophecy which will turn out to be true, as sure as you are and I am. There will come a day when all religious beliefs will be transmuted into the action of service to others. And those religions which today, and there are some, are purely academic religions, will be replaced. They'll be wiped off the surface of the earth if necessary. And this too appertains to all societies, clubs, committees, whatever they might call themselves, as belonging to this, that, or the other, unless those organizations are planned or can be planned in such a way that they give service to others, even if it's only to 2 or 3, nevertheless give service to others, they will be replaced. There is no place for them in the new world. There cannot be. Now, there are many organizations about which are giving service. They're giving service to the people who belong to the organization. They often give service to people outside. They're organizations which send out prayers and help and healing and so on to all the world, irrespective of who they are. Such organizations as these will last. But those very tight little cliques, and there are some in this country and in Europe, who are only concerned with some teaching which came through 200 years ago anyway, and they are now purely theoretical organizations, can close their book today or it'll be closed for them. That's it. And those statements are now stamped on the Akashic records and can never be erased by anyone. And they are true, as you will see. Most of you already realized this, maybe even realized it years ago, and are serving in one way or the other. I know some of you belong to groups who are serving by sending out healing and power and so on to the world and to the country as well as to your own congregation. You are the people who will succeed. No matter what is thrown against you, you will succeed.
Well, right now, and for the next month, it's an excellent time to take heed of this and to focus on helping other people, because right now, satellite number 3, which is a spacecraft who is in orbit of our Earth right now, Mars Sector 6, who we've heard from a couple times today, is in command of this craft. And this craft has the technology to enhance all of our spiritual action by a factor of 3,000 times. So if you think of saying one prayer to help, the victims of the earthquake in Morocco, it's like sending out 3,000 prayers to do so. And you do not need to believe in this craft to be able to take advantage of this. You don't have to know about it. You don't have to be a part of a particular religion. It helps everybody.
And what greater an example of technological supremacy and a greater, more elevated way of thinking is there, really, than satellite number 3?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fantastic. Well, I would like to now open it up if anyone has any questions on what we've discussed today. It's been quite wide-ranging, but if anyone would like to come forth with a question, either online or anyone here, we'd be very happy to discuss it.
So what happened that Dr. George King became interested in this? Did he have a personal experience with UFOs, or?
Yeah, the question is, how did Dr. King get involved in being a channel or a communicator with extraterrestrials? Well, in May of 1954, he was washing dishes in his apartment on a Saturday morning, and he heard a voice from outside of himself say, "Prepare yourself, you are to become the voice of interplanetary parliament." And he had no idea what that meant, and it shook him. He dropped all his dishes, broke them all. He did say that by sweeping up all the dishes is quite good exercise. But from that point on, that really affected him. He didn't know what it meant. And he spent the next week or so in real agony trying to understand that. And what he did about a week later was he decided he can't go on not knowing what this meant. He locked himself in his room. He said, "I'm going to go into meditation, and I'm not going to leave this room until I understand it." And when that happened, he was in his meditation. A yoga master who was alive at the time in the East walked through his locked door and sat in a chair in his room. And it was very real. He said he could feel or hear the floorboards creaking underneath his feet. And this yogi master gave him some advice on what this meant and how he needed to further prepare himself to start taking these transmissions, and that's what he did. Yeah.
So prior to that, what was his educational background, or what sort of job did he do?
Well, what did he do before the
Yeah.
command? Well, he had a variety of different jobs, and actually we do have his biography here, if you're, because that's a big question. But he had a variety of different jobs, and he grew up in England, and he went to school in England. He traveled around a little bit as a boy growing up there, but he has quite a variety, a real Renaissance man, I guess.
I think the key thing that really prepared him for this, and that was kind of the prerequisite, if you like, was this unequal yoga practice of 8 to 10 hours a day. And to give an illustration of that, one of the exercises he gave, which I find really, really telling, is we're talking about powers of concentration that are beyond most people. One exercise he gave, which sounds a bit absurd in a way, but until you try it, was to concentrate on a keyhole. He chose a keyhole because it's very dull and uninteresting, but to concentrate on a keyhole for 7 hours without thinking of a single other thing. Now, if you want to try it, I would recommend trying it, because it's an interesting experiment. You'll actually learn quite a lot about yourself. And what I would imagine most people would find is you can't do it for 7 hours, you can't do it for 7 minutes, and for a lot of people, 7 seconds is actually a challenge, to not think of something else for 7 seconds. And he could do it for 7 hours without thinking of a single other thing. So I like that because it's a kind of easy example that kind of illustrates some of these kind of incredible powers that were developed through this, virtually unheard of yoga practice. He wasn't living in a cave in the Himalayas in the kind of traditional kind of yoga master way that we hear these stories of in ancient times. He was living in London. He had various different jobs. He had to pay rent. He had all the, he just was a normal person, and yet he threw himself into this. So that really was what kind of prepared him for this.
So no near-death experience to add on to it?
No, nothing in particular like that. No, he was just psychic from a young age. He was drawn to spirituality. He could give healing at a young age. Yeah. So, yeah.
At the time that you said he heard the voice, was he practicing yoga prior, or is that when his interest began?
No, he'd done it for 8 to 10 hours a day for a decade.
Before?
For a decade.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
at the time, he was just washing dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Should we
Got
see if
some
there's some
online.
online?
Let me go to a couple here online. So, why can't humans see the Mars vehicles all the time, and why don't we see the civilization on Mars when we have photography taking pictures of the surface of Mars? It is an interesting question because, of course, 100 years ago we didn't really have photos of Mars. We might have a photo of a blurry dot. It was sort of the extent of our photos of Mars. And in some ways, people were more open to the idea of there being life on Mars. But now we have these really detailed photos, and as you were talking about earlier, it looks just a whole lot of rocks.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Well,
We kind of covered it, but
but they're not on this level of vibration, so we can see everything on this level of vibration. And if we were, really psychic and able, we could, also do as these great beings do and move in between the different realms. But I can't. I don't know about anybody else here. But what they're able, if you were to be able to raise your vibration to a different level of this plane, then everything there would be very physical. And because we are, as a race, so very basic, and we're warring, and we're not even getting along with each other, we naturally wouldn't be rating it at this really high level of vibration. Our vibration levels are quite low compared to these, great beings who are trying to help us. So that's why we can't see anybody on Mars with our physical eyes, is because they're not on this plane. They're higher up than we are.
Another way of looking at it is, if most cultures and religions on Earth believe in some sort of life after death, but where is that? It must exist somewhere. And so what the Cosmic Masters and Dr. King taught is that life is on Earth. It's on a different level of vibration. So here, this room we are, could be a lake somewhere else, could be a building of some other kind. They're all in the same place. It's the level of vibration that differs.
Dr. King said that if you were to be able to see them, it would be as if you were looking right ahead with a slight step up. And that's kind of where they're physically located. He said they fit together. It's not a perfect example, but you'll get the point, like a comb, where they're two separate places, but when they come together, they take up the same amount of space.
Someone says here, people online are claiming to channel Arcturians, Palladians, Venusians, etc. Some of their messages are very beautiful. Some are very strange. What to believe? And this is a really good question. There is so much information out there. It's really hard to know what to believe. And one thing that Dr. King said was that he was not the only channel for these beings to speak. They have spoken prior to him. He gave examples, some of these other people who have come throughout history, Krishna, Jesus, Buddha, and so on. And if you look at this is how I would answer this question. If you look at all of the religions, if you look at all the true spiritual teachings, they all essentially, you could boil them down to the same thing. Love one another. They all have these kind of core attributes. And if someone is saying something that is contrary to that, to me, that would be a red flag. If it's not about, ultimately, if you boil it down to love and service to others, then that would be a red flag.
And it's not to say that these people are being deliberately dishonest either. I think a lot of people might be getting information that they absolutely believe to be true, but they're just, it's a bit confusing. We're not all well versed in, as Dr. King was, on how to channel beings, with discrimination and to be able to tell where a source is coming from. But it's not to say that people who say this are being dishonest in any way.
That's
necessarily.
Right. They may
Yeah.
be or they may not be.
Yeah.
But it is true that if you're channeling someone, it is possible to channel a higher source or a lower source. And Dr. King was, because of this training that he'd undergone, able to be very discerning and know who he was communicating with.
Yeah.
But there have been instances of people channeling an entity that is actually less evolved than themselves. It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? They're like, well, I'm channeling this, it must therefore be true. But no, there's malicious, belligerent people who are looking for someone to speak through. If there's good people trying to do it, there must be bad people trying to do it. And so some people are unfortunately deluded, and it is really hard to tell the difference. So there's no quick and easy answer to that, but the more you study spiritual truth, the more you look at these sort of teachings throughout history, across the great masters that have come, you sort of attune yourself to it, and you'll find yourself more able to hopefully sort through the problems. But there's no easy way to it. Let me have a look here, what other questions we've got. Can you tell us a bit more about satellite number 3?
Well, satellite number 3 is a craft that goes into orbit of different planets, and it's a large craft. It's 1,550 feet above the surface of Earth, and it comes into orbit sorry? Miles. Sorry, yeah, miles above Earth. And it comes in orbit at least 4 times a year to help us really try to advance as much as possible. The energy comes from the sun through this craft and down to us. They're able to do really complex manipulations on this craft. They have crystals and all sorts of interesting technology on this craft. And in the book, The 9 Freedoms, actually, Dr. King has a diagram of this and what it looks like inside. And they come, and it's really spreading it's a wonderful opportunity for us to cooperate with it. But it's also a really good show of their motive. This craft rotates its photons in 360-degree arc, so we're unable to see it. But it's here to help us, and it's here to help us evolve and help us help other people.
That's right. And to give you an illustration, some of the beings aboard this craft who are the sort of crew have had to train for 30,000 years for their job. So they're already very advanced, and then we've been told that they've had to train for 30,000 years to do what they do, such as this sort of sophistication. And it's called satellite number 3. It's a kind of a strange name, but it's a very literal name, because there were 2 satellites of theirs already in orbit of Earth, and so this was the 3rd one. So they just didn't give it a flash name. They just named it in a very functional kind of a way.
I think we have another question.
Yeah, I'll describe something that I wasn't planning to, but I'm looking at everybody here except for you. I was always a spiritual child, and I had things happen that my mother understood, because she had things like that happen too. But I did a lot of kind of unwanted astral projection as a child, so I kind of got good at it. But I would just go floating up the ceiling and flying out every night. And I kind of got used to some of that.
Well, there are some descriptions, but I mean, we couldn't say whether that was that. I mean, yeah, I mean, people have amazing. It sounds like an amazing experience that you've had there, and yeah, and people have sort of experiences that we can't always explain, and we're looking at technologies here that are beyond our comprehension. There's obviously a lot more to life than we see here around us, and so. You've obviously had a fascinating experience there. Exactly what it was, I can't shed any light on it. But thanks for sharing.
This just kind of came to me. Do you think in our lifetimes, within let's say the next quarter of a century or so, that there would or could ever be a reason for the third satellite to dock? Or shall we say, to come into closer contact with perhaps even scout patrol and interact with Earth directly, more than it is with respect to what you described as a computer.
So the question is this: do we think that satellite number 3 will ever kind of visibly make itself known, or land among us?
Yeah, more than just the interaction it has right now.
Yeah, my personal opinion is we should actually be thinking about it the other way around. We should be hoping that in the next 25 years, we're doing such a good job that we don't need satellite number 3 to come. I think, if anything, we don't want them to get more involved. They're already helping us so much. And I believe they're doing karmically all that they're able to do.
I see.
But I think we should be trying to, hold our own, not need their help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the dates for these spiritual pushes, as we refer to them, were given, they were given for 1,000 years into the future. So, personally, I wouldn't be expecting them to become visible anytime soon.
Would that necessitate any conjecture, consideration that interplanetary what I'm trying to get to is space travel, or exchange of, shall we say, other contact other than just them sending us energy, etc. during a manifestation period?
Not until we show them a sign, right?
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I mean, if you look at in the past, in our ancient civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis, we had liaison with the planets.
Yes.
There was communication, but we were more evolved then.
Right.
In the spiritual sense of things, until we destroyed those civilizations. But at the moment, it would be speculation to say when we may have contact in a more kind of obvious, open way. And who knows? Who knows? Sorry, can't answer it anymore. We've got a good question here. There being positive beings like Jesus, Buddha, and those who are helping us, are there negative beings who wish us ill, like what people may call demons? And this is it's an interesting question. There's good and bad on Earth.
It's a very thoughtful question.
It would make sense that there's good and bad throughout the cosmos. And I know I have run up against this. People have asked me this question, often from quite a fundamental kind of Christian background. That is, because people, in a religious sense, people can sometimes struggle to explain what these things are. And so sometimes they are thought of as being, demonic. What the Cosmic Masters and Dr. King talked about is that the extraterrestrial life in this solar system is all far more evolved than us, and like infinitely more evolved than us, virtually. And because of their compassion, their love for all life, including us, they are trying to help us. And part of that help includes protection from forces that may be referred to as negative, because there are negative forces out there. So really, we are being protected by the more elevated beings in this solar system from any kind of negative entities coming from outside of Earth.
That's a very good question.
We've got enough people on Earth that are causing us problems as it is. Any more questions in here, or should I go to another
go ahead.
one?
To kind of, I guess, piggyback off that question and the answer,
I think that hits the nail on the head. We are definitely keeping ourselves down. They are here to help. But, you know, every time we have a negative thought, we're putting out negative energies, and there has to be something come back from that, you know. Jesus said, as you sow, so shall you reap. Buddha, you know, opposite or action and reaction are opposite and equal. You know, what we send out, we get back. And there's so much negativity out in this world that, yeah, we are creating these situations that we're in, which is why these, you know, as you say, these great beings are here trying to help us, you know, think properly, act properly, you know, help each other instead of, you know, always being against each other. Yeah.
Kind of magnifying the people that are doing good.
That's right.
Because we can't really go against the imbalance, it feels like. So they're trying to help that a little bit, in a sense, karmically, as much as they can.
Yeah, as much as they can.
Yeah, it's like if a child's learning to tie their shoelaces. If you tie the child's shoelaces for them every time, then they're not going to learn to tie their own shoelaces. They just, you know, you have to let them tie them themselves, and they're going to end up in a knot. They're going to come undone. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to mess it up. But you've kind of, if you do it for them every time, they're never ever. You're just going to be doing it for them every time forever. That's a simplistic way of kind of looking at it, but it's kind of that situation. They can't do everything for us, but they are bending over backwards to try and help us as much as they can, trying to, you know, provide us the tools to help ourselves, really. And that's kind of the presence of satellite number 3. They're not coming down here solving all of our problems, but they're giving us the energy to boost our efforts, if you like. So when we go out there, when we pray, when we radiate love and light with satellite number 3 here, our efforts are kind of more fruitful. They're enhanced, they're potentized. So they're kind of, they're helping us to help ourselves more than just helping us directly, which is the best way at the end.
I was trying to explain to a friend of mine the Great White Brotherhood. And could you just tell us a little bit about them and the correlation between them and these beings, these wonderful beings that are helping us?
Go ahead.
So the question was a little bit about the Great White Brotherhood, or sometimes referred to as the spiritual hierarchy of Earth, and their relationship with to extraterrestrial beings. So it's sometimes referred to Great White Brotherhood. Firstly, it's a white energy. It's nothing to do with race or skin color. And brotherhood is really just a term as well. It's male and female. And this is really the most advanced beings on Earth. Generally, they are ascended masters, although they're not always ascended masters. And as someone who is ascended is someone who has reincarnated upon Earth many, many times and evolved, and they've got themselves up to the point where they're really able to kind of graduate from the classroom of Earth and move on to live on another planet. This is one of the things that's talked about in the 9 Freedoms. Yes. Sounds incredible, but if you read the book, you sort of see how it all kind of works. It's amazing, and it's a series of messages given by Mars Sector 6 as well. And so ascension is this initiation that you go through. Now, some people, they can leave Earth, but they choose to stay on Earth to help. Again, this is this message of service, which is paramount in what they do. So they're effectively, as though they're ready to live on other planets. They're effectively interplanetary people, but effectively aliens in a way. Yeah. But they've chosen to sort of give up that incredible opportunity to stay here for a period of time, which may be centuries, which may be thousands of years. I don't know, to help people. So they're kind of very evolved and effectively kind of like that, but they're still here on Earth, and they do have a kind of relationship with beings on other planets.
They work together. That's
right. What we're told is the Lord Babaji here. You see him in the middle picture up on the right there. The Lord Babaji, who we understand from the Cosmic Masters, is a Saturnian, an aspect of a Saturnian being. He is the spiritual and political head of the Great White Brotherhood. And so that's our understanding of it. The Ascended Masters, of course, you hear about people like Saint Germain, who's sort of appeared throughout history in Europe to different people. and many others. Mount Shasta is often associated with it. And yeah, they're great elevated beings that are here helping us on Earth.
Yeah.
Just one quick one. How long is Satellite 3 here for? Is it for 30 days?
Satellite number 3 stays in orbit until the 9th of October, and then it comes back into orbit,
The 4th.
the 4th of November to the 10th of December as well. So there's the dates are out in the hallway, and they're also available online on our website, the known dates that they're here.
What's the website?
Our website is aetherius.org. That's aetherius.org.
There's an interesting one here. I'm not sure if this came in early or at what point. Someone's saying here, what exactly is the purpose of this transmission? We already know the US government has come out and basically admitted that this is a valid issue. What is your agenda? Well, firstly, I don't think the US government has come out and admitted this is an issue in the way that we are saying that it's an issue. They're trying to portray it as a threat, which we have tried to illustrate that it is not. And our agenda, if you like, the point we're trying to raise here is that these beings are here to help.
Yeah.
And that is really what they're all about. And they're not here to harm us. So that's really contrary in many ways to what a lot of people are saying.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that the transmissions that we read were given in the 1950s. And even now, the governments are not kind of, as you said, really coming out and saying, yeah, we've lied to you. So the fact that these were given, 70 years ago, I think it's really kind of held up to be quite accurate.
Let me see if there's anything else here. I think most of these things we've already answered. Someone's asked just to repeat what Dr. King said about the service to others and the future of religion. He was quite dogmatic about it in that he basically said that if a religion is, or a sort of spiritual organization is purely academic, i.e. not practically trying to help others, that it will not last. Service is really the new religion.
It's all well and good, learning how to help people, but I think Dr. King even said if you learn to walk on water, well, what have you done? You've walked on water, but use these these gifts that you have to help other people, teach them to do things, help raise them, because it's great having this information, but what good is it if you're not using it?
That's right. Well, any other questions? Yep.
I think it's more crucial in today's times, in this present moment in history, that we all focus brilliantly on our freedoms to, in fact, be unified for good. Because I don't believe there's any government at the moment that is doing it for us.
Mm.
And it's going to get harder, because times are hard. And with their help, we must acknowledge it, and we must succeed.
Mm.
And I don't know how else to say it, but I don't see anyone in power, human type, helping us.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the reason why governments are kind of we have a conspiracy to begin with. If they knew, if everybody knew that politics is not the answer and that spiritual action is the answer, we wouldn't need politicians, and then they wouldn't have power, and they wouldn't, we would look to a higher source. And I think that's one of the reasons why a conspiracy exists, why there is a cover-up.
Exactly.
They don't want our freedom.
Yeah. Well,
one
one last question.
So satellite number 3 is different from the Black Knight that's orbiting around?
Well, satellite number 3 is, I'm not familiar with that particular one you mentioned, but yeah, satellite number 3 is, as we've described it, it's here for a very positive purpose, completely unselfishly working 24 hours a day to help the human race. Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, We do have a few books on here. If anyone's interested, they're outside, they're out the back. They're also available online as well, most of them as ebooks. For anyone there, they'll be in the chat or in the description if you want to find out more about them. We have a new thing called Aetherius Cloud. The lecture extracts that we heard today, they're available on Aetherius Cloud. So many of Dr. King's lectures are available, and more, it's only just been released, more and more will be available. You can get a free trial for a week if you want to just listen to a couple of things and see how you like it. And then we have an email series, which we'd love for you to keep in touch and sort of connect and find out more about what we have, the Aetherius Society's understanding of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. You can do that through this email series, which is just the website, aetherius.org/UFOs. Scroll to the bottom of the page, there's a form there, and you can get this email series. It's just a few emails, but it'll get you into the picture and help you understand where we're coming from. Our emails are there as well. Thank you very much for everyone for coming along. Thank you for joining online as well.
And thank you for all of your questions.
Thank you for the questions.